George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
And it's live from The Hague. I still haven't found who I'm looking for. You know who I mean now. Broken Britain was burning over the weekend, and we are promised that this evening will be another Crystal Nacht, another night of the long knives. But are the perpetrators actually only bluffing? The police are taking nothing for granted and have miraculously drummed up thousands of public order police. Who knew that we had them? And I wish we'd seen them before. And the Egyptian state has warned its aircraft to stay away from Iran tonight between the oddly specific hours of 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. Do they know something that we don't? Or is Iran continuing the psychological operation of keeping everyone waiting? Well, it crashed the stock markets, didn't it? And the situation in Ukraine has turned to farce. Ukraine has now invaded Russia. We're waiting for the inevitable condemnation of same. There'll be much more of this with three of the best guests you can possibly expect. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Well, our poll this evening is TommyRobinson, a domestic terrorist, is possibly unlawful. I don't know. The law is changing at such a pace in Britain. I've just been told you can now be charged for retweeting someone else's tweet if it is hateful. I'm not sure that clamping down on little Elon Musk, the imbecile, how does a guy like that get to become the richest guy in the world? He appears to genuinely believe that Kamala Harris is a communist, which either means he knows nothing at all about communism or nothing at all about Kamala Harris. I'll tell you later, Elon, exactly who and what she is. Chameleon, I call her. Now, the poll, is TommyRobinson a domestic terrorist, is a binary one, yes or no. I don't write these polls, I quickly remind you. You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, or on my Twitter, my X, on my YouTube stream, or on the YouTube community poll. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, or on Facebook, or on Twitter, or any other of the platforms that allow you to do so, please share with all your contacts, friends, followers, etc. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. We're headed towards 500,000 subscribers and are determined to get there in short order. Where to begin? Last weekend was truly nightmarish, and more footage has emerged of a man who's now been charged, for example, in Manchester, of all places, in a petrol station that I use. Well, let me quote the police. A man has been charged with affray, that's A-F-F-R-A-Y, for, I think the phrase they used, were advancing on a Muslim couple with a hedge trimmer. The early reports were that he was racing fast towards the couple with a chainsaw, and that's kind of how it looked to me. But the police know better and have charged him with affray. When I saw the footage, I was more afraid than affray. I thought that could actually have been my family in that petrol station. And my good wife actually asked me last night after watching the video if I thought it was any longer safe for her, an Indonesian, and my 3 mixed-race children with her, and I have 2 other mixed-race children of Arabic descent, if it was safe for us to continue living in Britain. And I can't tell you how sad that made me feel. It was a dismal affair. The state, for a while, looked as if it might be overwhelmed. And but for the grace of God in Rotherham, for example, but also in Tamworth, we didn't have an Odessa situation where an entire building burned down with everyone inside it incinerated. The mob that surrounded the hotel in Rotherham and smashed through the doors and windows and then set it alight. There's no alleged about any of this. I watched it in real time, live, happening on television. The Tamworth Hotel situation was even more dangerous. There were lots of people in there, and the fire took hold quite quickly. And the firefighters were abused and were pelted with stones when they arrived to put the fire out. These 2 acts were acts of domestic terrorism. And that's why we're asking, is Tommy Robinson a domestic terrorist? Yes or no? These 2 acts, whether he's responsible in any way for them, these 2 acts undoubtedly constitute arson with intent to murder. That is, without doubt, terrorism, because it was motivated by a political idea, and that political idea being that these refugees, asylum seekers, and workers in that hotel, who may have been as blue-eyed as me, were all deserving of death because they were concentrated there in that hotel, in that refugee hostel. Of course, not every action that took place over the weekend constituted terrorism. Not everyone on these so-called protests was a terrorist. Not everyone there was a fascist, although fascists were there in number. The truth is that the legitimate grievances that the British people have, and about which I spoke on Wednesday, are so legitimate and such deep grievances that almost anything can spark a problem in our country, because the situation is dire in Britain. Our country is falling apart at the seams. It's going down the drain. Our country is in the grip of a deep malaise, which is not helped by the shrunken nature of our political class. I mean, in 1940, after the fall of France, at least there was a Churchill that could step forward and rally the country and describe a direction in which we must go and command the loyalty of enough people behind him to take us with him, take the country with him. We have no Churchills in this picture. When I listened to Sir Keir Starmer's belated Sunday night address, I could have been listening to the speaking clock for those old enough to remember it. Or for younger viewers, it was like watching David Brent of The Office. It was meaningless babble. It was meaningless babble that he was reading from a tightly written brief. He had to look down at his notes every 5 to 10 seconds to refresh his memory on what he should say about a grave domestic crisis that was obvious to anyone calling themselves a leader, what he ought to be saying, but not obvious to Keir Starmer. There he is there, David Brent of The Office. Or at the third stroke, it will be 2 minutes after 7. The truth is, our media, our politicians, our economy, our society, our culture is very grievously wounded, bleeding, lying on the floor. I can tell you, now that I'm out of the country, how different it looks in other people's countries. Nobody is afraid walking around Rotterdam as I was today. Nobody's looking over their shoulder, looking for someone to come and hit them over the head because of the color of their skin or where they came from. Nobody is burning down their own shops, burning down their own libraries, destroying their own public realm. So shrunken have our people's ambitions become that even the looters are going for Crocs and trays of steak bakes from Greggs. In America, they loot Louis Vuitton. In England, they loot Greggs for a pasty. In America, they loot for Jimmy shoes. In England, they loot for Crocs. We're in a very bad way. And the politicians we have are not going to lead us out of it. And the mass media that we have shares responsibility for the emergence of that political class and its maintenance in power. A class with no ambition and no ability to change the direction in which we are. So a lot of these people, whilst no doubt infected by racist ideas, you can't have an empire on which the sun never sets because God would never trust you in the dark, and not leave imbued in generation after generation racist ideas. Of course, there are plenty of racist ideas in our country, but they would not be moving people to the extent that they have over last weekend if it were not for the fact that we've got no houses. You can't get a doctor's appointment. You're unlikely to get your kid into the school of your choice. You will not get your potholes repaired. That street light will never come back on. The high street will remain shuttered. And where it's not shuttered, the province of pound shops and betting shops and urban dereliction. That's the truth of it. Our country is stricken by underachievement, by poverty pay, by pensioner poverty. Now more poor after the decision by a Labour government to cut their heating allowance, their winter fuel allowance. Our people are hopeless. Our people are directionless. And our public sphere and the politicians in it show no signs of being able to point the way and lead the way out of it. So tonight there's going to be 100 more protests. If that happens, it will be a Kristallnacht. It will be remembered forever in British history, because 100 protests of several hundred people bent on assault and bent on destruction can only lead to a Donnybrook. It will either be a Donnybrook between local residents and those allies of theirs that have turned up, or it will be a Donnybrook with the police, including the thousands of new police officers that have mysteriously, miraculously appeared, apparently from nowhere. Or it will be a Donnybrook between all three, but there will be blood. And so we've got to hope that they are bluffing, that they don't have the capacity to mount 100 protests this evening. We'll keep you posted as the news comes in. My advice to people thinking about it would be, where the police are there in significant numbers, leave the police to it. Let the law take its course. Because I'll tell you what the best gift to the Tommy Robinsons of this world would be: to draw local communities into counter-violence in self-defense, yes, but counter-violence in self-defense. That would be the greatest gift that you could give them, and would begin to change a paradigm in public opinion in the country, which is extremely disadvantageous to the Robinsons of this world right at this point in time. Even the Daily Mail has to condemn and turn over Tommy Robinson off his sun lounger in a 5-star hotel in Ayia Napa in Cyprus at the expense of the foolish followers that he has accrued over the decades of rabble-rousing on the right. Now, they may be bluffing. Maybe the Iranians are bluffing. The Egyptians don't think so. They've just announced a ban on all Egyptian air traffic going into Iranian airspace between 1 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the morning, which, as I said, is rather odd because it presupposes that this problem will start at 1 and finish at 4. And if it starts at 1, I guarantee you it will not finish at 4. That is an impossibility. But the markets in Western capitals, stock markets, they don't think Iran is bluffing either. Of course, there are other reasons why the stock markets crashed, first in Japan, then in the United States, and then in several other big marketplaces. But the fear of an all-out war in the Middle East, which could trigger World War III, is a pretty good reason to dump your stocks and shares. They won't be much good to you if the world is going up in flames. Neither will money. But if you turned it into gold at the current prices, it would probably be the best thing to do. That is not financial advice. I'm the last man qualified to give you financial advice. And lastly, the tables have turned, but only for a few hours. Having collapsed their defensive front, the Ukrainian armed forces wheeled, retreated, and invaded Russia. Of all places, Kursk, the site of the mother of all battles, the mother of all tank battles, which turned the tide more even than Stalingrad in the Second World War. After Kursk, there was no doubt whatsoever that the Hitlerites would in the end be crushed in the rubble of Berlin, as they duly were in May of 1945. So to attack Russia, to invade Russia, to begin killing civilians in the streets, a pregnant woman just been killed, a whole carload of civilians traveling on a road just been killed in Kursk, is no doubt momentarily an embarrassment for the Russian government, but it will only last a few hours before it turns into yet another military catastrophe for Zelensky and his gang in Kiev. People are tired of Zelensky now, not least in Ukraine, where most people want him gone. But they're tired of him and of Ukraine in all Western capitals, despite what our political leaders try to pretend. Ukraine mania is a very distant memory now. If you don't believe me, check the avatars of people on social media. Look for Ukrainian flags anywhere in Western countries. Look for people rattling a tin for the Ukraine. It's all over now, baby blue. And that's what most Ukrainians now want to happen. They want a negotiated settlement of this conflict, which should never have occurred, need never have occurred. They want it brought to a swift end now by negotiations, while there's still something to negotiate about. while I'm on the subject, some people are criticizing me for welcoming the overthrow of Modi's tyrant in Bangladesh. Sheikh Hasina has fled to India just ahead of a vengeful crowd. After nearly 20 years of dictatorship, people are saying to me, don't you know it's because she had good relations with Russia, good relations with China? I don't care about our relations with Russia or China. I care about Bangladesh. I care about the Bangladeshis who've lived lives of misery under her iron heel. I care about the political prisoners who have rotted in her jails. I don't care about the geopolitics of Bangladesh. I want the people of Bangladesh to be free to choose their own government. And while I'm on that, a good friend of mine was a Bangladesh MP by the name of IliasAli. He disappeared and is believed murdered some years ago, almost a decade ago. I demand to know what happened to him. And I call on the new authorities in Bangladesh to investigate thoroughly his kidnapping and his presumed murder. I will not let this case go because IliasAli was a friend of mine, and I stand by my friends always. Fasten your seatbelts. Going to be a bumpy night. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Hello, George. I heard Neil Kinnock commenting on you losing your seat, okay? I was disgusted and amazed at what he said. He was like an ignorant football supporter. He actually punched his fist in the air, saying he was delighted that you were gone, that you were a horrible person. That's the first thing he said. When he was leader of the Labour Party, he was conniving morning, noon and night to kick you out of the party. Now, this is before Tony Blair, and you were in good standing with the Labour Party. Mr. Kinnock, that chap just totally disgusted me. So what I think the British have to do, and the Irish and everybody else, is they need a new conversation and stop drinking Coca-Cola and Pepsi. And I think all those people in British civil society, including Jeremy Corbyn, Diane Abbott, Ken Livingstone, and very many more, have to have a conversation about how to wean the British and everybody else away from these Coca-Cola and Pepsi parties.
Nobody knows who Neil Kinnock is. Those who know who he is know he's the man from the Welsh Valleys that betrayed the miners. Frankly, the hatred of Neil Kinnock I wear not even as a badge of honour, a little tiny pin maybe, because pretty soon no one will have heard of him at all. But the wider subject that you raise is the important one. I don't know, Jeremy says he doesn't want to form a party. That's fine by me. I've got my own party. I'll be staying in it anyway. But what I would like him to do is to announce a new popular front, like the one that has just, I can tell you officially, won the French parliamentary elections.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Is Tommy Robinson a domestic terrorist? Yes or no? You can vote on Telegram, on Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. If you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344, and free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 0808 196 5522, and the number for the rest of the world is 44203 966 2625. Now, Norman Brennan is a veteran and very well, highly regarded police officer, now a commentator not only on policing matters, but of course, at times like these, he's in great demand for his views on the law and order and policing situation that we face in the country. And he's been good enough to join us again here on the mother of all talk shows. Norman, let's start with something we might agree on, because there's much that we don't. Britain is grossly under-policed. We saw that at the weekend, where a thin blue line that wasn't even wearing blue, and weren't, for the most part, men that would inspire confidence in the way that police officers used to do, a thin line that looked repeatedly almost on the point of being overwhelmed. We don't have enough police in Britain. Am I right?
Yeah, good evening, George. Yes, you're absolutely right. It's gone from the thin blue line to the transparent blue line. About 10 years ago, under the Tories, TheresaMay reduced frontline officers by 22,000 and backroom staff by 27,000. And as a result of that, you had fewer police officers doing more with less. And it was at that time that the criminals took over the streets of Britain. And in the past 14 years, the police have not been able to get them back. So you've got men and women at the moment that still remain, because under Boris Johnson, he wanted 20,000 new police officers. Well, there weren't new police officers. They were replacing the 22,000 that he stole off of us, or his government stole off us. And to date, George, 5,000 have already resigned. Hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of frontline officers across Britain are looking at getting out, resigning. They've had enough. They're abused, they're attacked, they're insulted, they're fouled by just about everyone within the criminal justice system. They have weak, out-of-touch bosses. And the caveat to the policing numbers, George, is this, is in the last, I think it's about last 8-9 years, policing has not kept up with the population growth. So we're a further 18,000 police officers short. We've lost all of our experience. The average service time is 3 years. So you've got young, lost, pretty out of touch police officers standing on the streets of Britain today, risking their lives and doing their best to keep the peace in the most severe of trying circumstances.
And one of the other things that is the responsibility of Theresa May and Boris Johnson was the sale of police stations. Once upon a time, there was a police station everywhere. There was a police box where there wasn't a police station, directly linked, just pick the phone up to the police station. I know I'm going back to Dixon of Dock Green times, but that's what it used to be. Now, almost every police station has been sold into she flats. A place like Hackney, if ever a place needed a police station, Norman, Hackney needs a police station. Hackney doesn't have a police station. The reality is our police stations that we do have look like Greg's, and they get set on fire just as easily. I saw one on Friday burning, and it looked like a little shop instead of a police station. And the police inside obviously couldn't defend it.
I'll be quite honest here, George. I've been in policing and law and order for 45 years. I'm absolutely ashamed of what policing has become. I'm probably one of their lead independent voices. I'll tell you the truth. I'll tell you the way it is. If they're crap, I'll tell you. If their leadership is crap, I'll tell you. But what I'll also tell you is there's men and women that get up every day that do their best in the most trying of circumstances, as I've just said. But you're right. The public don't see the police. We used to be on the streets. If you see us on the streets, you feel reassured. You feel as though there's somebody there for you to go and engage with, to talk to share information. If you're a victim of crime, you're lucky to see a police officer ever. The majority of us now get a crime number. I think victims of crime are worth far more than just a crime number. So basically, the police have left the streets. It's fire brigade policing. They go from one emergency to the next, to the next, to the next. They never get time to do paperwork. Just look at the riots and public order that's happened across Britain as we speak, George. You have got tens of thousands of police officers being taken away from their beats. You've got tens of thousands of police officers that have been allocated crime to investigate, the public to go and see, victims to go and take statements from. They are queuing up in their millions. The police will never get time to actually investigate any of those crimes. And now we've got a police service in Britain that is non-existent. It is the transparent blue line. And that is why, or certainly one of the reasons why, the public and victims of crime have lost faith and confidence within the British Police Service. We've still got a bit of respect, but you need more than respect. You need that confidence, and you need to be there to reassure the public. We're not, and the public right are kicking the backsides of the frontline police officers, when in fact it's their bosses that they should be kicking, and the political class within Britain that have failed us and consequently failed the public and victims of crime.
Amen, amen. Now, tonight might be a big night, might be a damp squib. Let's pray for a damp squib. Let's pray for a downpour, because as happened in Burnley earlier today, it was a downpour and only 2 of them turned up. But if we're not lucky, is there really going to be 100 mobs on the streets of Britain tonight? And will our emaciated police force be able to handle them?
Well, let me tell you for a start, these 6,000 police officers that are Keir's army, what does he say, the stand-in army? Well, these are not new police officers. These are police officers, I just said earlier on, that have been dragged off the streets, out of offices, leave cancelled. They've been put together from police officers that are already depleted in certain areas around Britain, in fact, every area around Britain. So they're not new officers, they're existing officers that day in and day out now are putting their public order gear on and stand in lines of hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals. 100 demonstrations. The police have got pretty good intelligence. We follow social media. They've got good informants, reliable informants, and they have actually said, the police service today, the chief officers of police said that nearly all 100 organisations, or demonstrations rather than organisations, are probably going to turn up. And sadly, there will be some amongst them, if not many of them, that are intent on inflicting damage, violence, hurt, arson, overturning police cars and attacking the communities for which they've gathered. And the police are the ones who've got to stand between good and bad and right and wrong. And whatever the police do today, or what they don't do, they will be criticised. It's a job now that I would never recommend anybody to do. It was a job I love. It's still in my blood today. And if you didn't have them men and women, George, standing there, like them, not like them, are they two-tier, are they not two-tier, do they care enough, do they not? If you didn't have them, you'd have anarchy on the streets. Well, I'm afraid today, or this last week, that's exactly what we're looking in the face. Anarchy on the streets of Britain. It's not civil war like Elon Musk is suggesting, although I see where he's coming from. But we are facing anarchy, and I'm afraid we have not got the police personnel to deal with it. So if there's full riots across Britain, not just in selected areas, the British Police Service will not be able to survive, and sadly, the public will probably need to be looking after themselves and their family. It's a dreadful thing to say. I hope it doesn't happen like you say, George. I hope the heavens are open. But if you haven't got police officers that can't already protect communities under everyday crime, where are we going to get them when we've got all-out public disorder and anarchy throughout the streets of Britain?
That's right, and it's a very dramatic picture that you paint, and it's not an exaggerated one either. I'm certain of that. Lastly, Norman, what about sentencing? There's a lot of this two-tier allegation going on. Two-tier Keir, Elon Musk said. But what about the two-tier sentencing? I saw a guy get a 12-month for setting fire to 2 police cars. Who knew it was that cheap? Set fire to 2 police cars, you'll get a 12-month, and you'll serve, what, 6 to 8 months of that. Not so long ago, I mean, I'm a veteran of the miners' strike, Norman. I was facing real policemen in those days. 6-foot tall policemen in those days, with wooden batons in those days. And at that time, you would have got years for setting fire to police cars. Now you get months. Is this sentencing that we've seen so far sufficient as a deterrent, in your view?
George, let me be absolutely clear. Everything within Britain, with its criminal justice system, policing, broken. The prisons, broken. The courts, broken. The probation service, broken. Everything to do with law and order and the criminal justice system in Britain is broken. The sentences are an absolute joke. The sentences that people get nowadays are so ridiculous that many people now won't even report crime. I just saw 2 days ago, and I posted, that to make room for some of these rioters, the prison service have released a murderer, or someone convicted of manslaughter. A 14-year-old boy was attacked with a machete. 6 or 7 youths were sent to prison for murder and manslaughter. The one I referred to got 2 years and 8 months. He's about to be released for serving only 5 months. 5 months for killing somebody. Today, George, I got a phone call. In the last 9 years, believe it or not, I still do my bit. I don't just talk a good job, I do one, I hope. In the last 9 years, I've arrested or detained 30 shoplifters. Some of them been violent, some are professional teams. Today, I got a phone call from somebody. I was only in my local Waitrose. It's a lovely little shop in Twickenham a few weeks ago. The individual that was pointed out to me by the staff, they knew her old bill, had bottled a security guard the week before. Serious bruising injuries to that individual's face. I was told it was this person. So when he left the store having stolen a number of items, I challenged him. I said, I'm a retired police officer. I'm arresting you for assault last week. He punched me in the face, almost knocked me out, and I've got a bruise on my face. There was a struggle. A car wing mirror was knocked off. There was a massive fight. He's 20 years younger than me. I can barely walk, put one foot in front of the other. I detained him. For once, the police turned up in time. He was wanted on warrant, George, for a burglary, for a number of other assaults and other issues, including criminal damage. He failed to turn up at court for sentencing 3 weeks ago, one released on bail. He was finally sentenced 3 days ago for all of these offences. 4 weeks suspended sentence for 2 years. One of the most dangerous shoplifters in Britain at the moment attacked me, a leading law and order campaigner. I say to anybody in Britain now, if you've no faith in the British Police Service, I'm sorry that we failed you so badly. I apologise immensely on behalf of them. I cannot apologise on behalf of chief polices, the criminal justice system, and the government that is so detached with what's happening in Britain today. We are facing anarchy. And I've never known a government or a Home Secretary within 4 weeks having had all the answers in opposition that can't find any. And if they don't get their act together, George, I would certainly march in London myself on a vote of no confidence. I've never been so angry, upset and disappointed. George, I love my country. I don't like what it's become. And as far as policing and law and order is concerned, I don't like the direction it's going. And at 65 years of age, glad I'm nearer this end of my life than the beginning. What does that say about someone who passionately cares and loves his country, but hates what it's become and the direction in which it's going?
And so say all of us. You're an officer and a gentleman, retired or not. Norman Brennan, thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. A quite extraordinary interview that will live long. Is Tommy Robinson a domestic terrorist? Yes or no? 23,337 of you have already voted. Let me take a quick break, then it's your calls. I think all the way to the hour. Stay tuned. Let's hear from Mehdi. Go ahead, sir.
Hello, George. Thank you very much for taking my call. This is such an honor because one thing I want to tell you is in 2003, I thought that you, I'll say it, I thought you were a prattling liberal idiot. 20 years later, I'm here honored to speak to you to say live on air, I'm sorry, I should have listened to you back then. You're bringing the truth to what's going on out there. And one of the things is U.S. policy, whatever it is now, is our government. The problem is that it's run by people with absolutely no honor. They have no shame in what they will do to accomplish what they want. And I really think part of what's going on, that's driving what's going on in Ukraine, is that it's the possibility of all the corruption that it will uncover that has happened there with the influence of our country and NATO since 2014.
Yeah, you spoke extremely powerfully and very graciously, and I'm grateful for it. But you put your finger on, I think, something that's been in the back of my mind for a while. I grew up in a time, indeed I sat in Parliament for almost 30 years, during a time when there were certain standards. There were double standards, of course, and there was a great deal of hypocrisy, but the ruling elite had standards that they tried to keep up. Nowadays, that facade has been torn asunder. Now they're not even pretending to be honorable gentlemen and ladies. Now they're no longer pretending that their institutions, their great departments and ministries are in anything to do with contemporary politics other than an arm of the ruling party. My last word, Mehdi, I ain't no liberal, bruv. I wasn't back in 2003, and I ain't any more liberal today.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Stay safe in Bristol and in Walthamstow. I'm looking at the news coming in. Apparently, they weren't bluffing after all. Is Tommy Robinson a domestic terrorist, yes or no? 24,415 of you have voted. Let's go to Canada for the first call. Salman on the riots in Britain. That's how news travels in this global university of the airwaves. Salman, go ahead.
Hello, Mr. Galloway. It's an honor to speak to you after many years of following you.
Thank you.
Thank you, I want to speak. I want to just bullet pointed a couple of points I want to make. Firstly, is Tommy Robinson a terrorist? Now, by the definition of the word terrorist, is in my correct me if I'm wrong, is one who encourages or incites violence for a political gain upon innocent people. So my opinion would be, yes, he is a domestic terrorist, and myself being of a brown Pakistani background who was born, don't let the voice fool you, I'm actually born and raised in Scunthorpe, North Lincolnshire, and appear to look Pakistani. I would say that I feel, or my people from Scunthorpe or across Britain would be feeling the same, in the sense that we would be terrified to walk on the streets after seeing what's been going on. So that's why I would say Tommy Robinson would be a domestic terrorist. And secondly, with Tommy Robinson's sentiment of wearing the IDF T-shirts and proudly flaunting himself around, I mean, my personal opinion would be he would be with him and the IDF are like two cheeks on the same backside, as you would say. You know?
Exactly. Well, he's actually in the middle. He's right in the middle of the two cheeks. The outfit that Tommy Robinson runs is a fully paid up asset of the Israel lobby in the United States, in Canada, in South Africa, and in Israel itself. Tommy Robinson is a paid agent of Israel. and has openly stated that in any war he would fight for Israel. He's never, of course, volunteered to join the British armed forces, and I wouldn't like him in any trench near me if he did, and our country needed the people to step forward to defend it. He is an Israeli asset, and of course they fastened upon him as an asset because their intention was to make the Muslims in Britain so unpopular that Israel would accrue political benefit as a result. And that's what the last 20 years nearly of Tommy Robinson's life has been about. Salman, last word to you.
Yeah, so you've basically confirmed, what my suspicions would have been, that he's like a paid person to cause political and civil unrest in the United Kingdom.
Sure.
And not only that, to add to that, before I go, I don't want to take much of your time, but these things that are happening in the UK, I would say echoes of fear from my grandparents, from the rivers of blood speech from Enoch Powell are rippling through people like me, being the fourth generation of my family in the United Kingdom. Even though I don't live there, and the reason I don't live there, I left 2019. I just got my children together, my wife and 5 kids. There was a point my wife had the hijab on. She was taking her kids in Scunthorpe to school, and a bloke nearly ran over my wife with the children walking the kids to school. And my wife's a white convert Canadian, and he said, F off back to your own country, and nearly ran him over. And it's like, we've had instances like that, but generally UK is not bad. We have a very vibrant, good community in Scunthorpe. Everybody knows each other, and they put together. And there was a good turnout the other day in Scunthorpe because there was a report that they were going to cause problems in the centre of the town where all the multicultural businesses are and the mosque is. And everybody put in together because we know each other, and nobody turned up. But what I mean to say, I didn't want to be pessimistic in that respect. However, there have been instances like the one with my wife. When I was a kid, we had, general racism. It happens. It's unfortunate reality of life. But it got to a point where I thought that, one day, God forbid, I thought maybe Canada would be a better place because my wife being a Canadian national and kids being dual.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well, look, I don't think it's as bad as that yet, Salman. It could become so. It's very important to have a plan B. I've got a plan B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. But everyone should have at least a plan B. But let's stay put for now and fight for the Britain that we believe in. Let's go to North London, where Simon wants to talk about the riots. And there may indeed be a riot already in Walthamstow. I don't know. Simon, go ahead.
George, thank you for taking my call. And what a thrill it is to talk to you. I've been a long-time follower and subscriber on your channel. Forgive my voice, I'm having some treatment at the moment, which is affecting it. George, I really wanted to, first of all, just a 30-second background. I'm a 67-year-old British man. Our country has become completely unrecognisable since, basically, Tony Blair took over. I have a very valuable gold watch, which I've owned for 42 years. I used to wear it every day of the week. For the last 2 years, I don't dare put it on and leave the house, and I'm going to sell it because it's too scary. Point number one. Point number two is, I've lived in 5 different countries in the world. I speak 3 languages, and one of the golden rules when you visit another country is as soon as you arrive, you respect their laws and you respect their customs, and then you try and integrate if you're going to live there. You cannot live in another country unless you integrate with society, period. But the point is...
I don't know, there's a lot of Scots in the Costa... There's a lot of Scots and English down in the Costa del Sol. Don't do much integrating.
No, I know. I mean, I've seen it everywhere that I've lived. So this is something that people seem to have just pushed aside. They don't realise. But anyway, the point I wanted to make to you is I I saw your little post that you made earlier today about your show tonight or something. It's about a minute long. And I posted a reply on it. And I said, George, I'm so incensed about what's going on. I'm going to call you tonight, and I hope I talk to you. I'm thrilled, as I said, to talk to you. But last night, and I don't know if Richard Medhurst is going to be one of your guests tonight, but I saw a video.
Not tonight,
I saw a video that Richard posted last night about Robinson. I've heard of Tommy Robinson. I've never followed him. I see what's going on in the news and everything else. The mindless violence and vandalism and everything else, I just can't believe it. I mean, it's just off the scale as far as I'm concerned. And I cry every day for the carnage and the genocide that's going on in Gaza. I don't pay attention to any legacy media at all. I get all my information off a lot of the people that you follow, the guests on your show, and that gives me a perspective on it. I listen to everybody, and it gives me a perspective on everything that's going on. The point was, I watched Richard's show last night and saw, as your earlier guest, Norman Brennan, said, or I think it was him. First of all, I agree with everything Norman Brennan said. It's not the police's fault, it's the people that are driving in. It's our government's fault, what's going on. And they're doing nothing about it. They're not paying attention to anybody. But the point is, what I saw on Richard's show last night about him being an Israeli asset, or the implications are that he is an Israeli asset of some sort. And then there was this photograph of him wearing an IDF T-shirt and partying with IDF soldiers or whatever. I don't know when the photo was taken. And then Richard, although I don't like labelling people, I try to avoid that at all times. I treat everybody equally. He made the comment about what's his name, Robinson, going to the States on a false passport and going to prison. Well, that's his fault. He takes his chances. But, he's had like 4 different names. Apparently, when he was sentenced in the American court, the judge was confused which name to put on his sentencing, because he had so many. So that was one thing. But the fact that he was fraternising with these people, and the thing that really got me was that apparently when he went MIA the other day, when he was supposed to be appearing in court in London, Richard revealed that all his legal bills for God knows how many months have been paid for by an Israeli support organisation, which may or may not be, it may be an NGO, who knows? But they paid 60,000 quid to represent him in the court.
64,000, yeah. And
apparently there was
That's exactly... well, I was worried that you were going to quote Richard saying something that I could not defend or agree with, but everything that you said, Richard said, is absolutely accurate and true. And the mayor or the deputy mayor of Jerusalem, the Israeli deputy mayor of occupied Jerusalem, put out a meme, I don't know if you've seen it, of a London police officer with somebody that was supposed to look like an extremist Muslim cuddling up to the police officer, as both decided to destroy Britain. Israel's deeply involved in this situation. At the very least, they're involved in it through that meme from Jerusalem, but through the funding, endless funding of millions over the years of Tommy Robinson and whatever his latest squeeze is, whatever his latest political organization is. And if he forms another one, it will be no different in character. It'll just have a different name, and it will become a new and different funding stream. That's what he's up to. Simon, terrific call, mate, from North London. Matthew Wren says, Bedfordshire Police have announced today that they have more officers on duty, and that rumours are going around that a number of parts of the towns of Bedford and Luton are to have protests and riots. Well, I'd rather hear when things are actually happening rather than that they are rumoured to be going to happen, because there's a lot of psychological warfare going on here. March them up to the top of the hill, only to march them down again. Holden said, so we are indeed banana republics now. No police, but nefarious organisations like MI6, CIA are bloated like a corpse rotting in the summer sun. And Morn's lad says, what has George to say about the Muslim guy brandishing a sword at a counter demo? He has been done before for hateful, threatening chants. This guy is barely mentioned by the mainstream. Well, I've read that he's been charged in just about every part of the mainstream. Perhaps you're guilty of two-tier perception there, Morn's lad. What do I have to say about it? Well, I can't comment on that individual case because he's now before the courts. But anybody who takes a sword to a counter demonstration should go into prison for years, not months, but for years. Matter of fact, carrying a machete in public in Britain should be an automatic 10-year stretch with no possibility of time off for good behaviour or parole. Take a machete out, go to jail for 10 years. That would be my policy if I was in charge. Terence is in Corby on the riots. On you go, Tel. What are you thinking?
Thank you very much, Mr. Galloway. 2 points, actually. The first point is I'd like to sing my praises to Mr. Brennan. He's a type of Brit that I associated with, black, white, Irish, Catholic, Portuguese, whatever colour you are. He stands with the British people of all persuasions. I like that very much indeed. Second point is the point that we discussed the other week about Abe Lincoln, Anthony Blinken. I've called him the president for years. You yourself call him Consigliere, but it's nice to see that he's now wheedled in one of the best APAC fundraisers of all time, The Last Waltz. Now he's going to be standing alongside Kamala Harris, and so Palestinians praise God that he just lets it rain down and down, because I think that's what he's going to do. We're in for a hostile time, and thank God for Yemeni people as well. So we haven't got all night to talk about everything, Mr. Galloway, but Mr. Brennan,
Terence, thanks. Brennan deserves a big pat on the back. That was a terrific interview. I'm glad you thought so too, Terence. I watched Kamala saying good evening, I think 7 times she said the 2 words, good evening, and no other words. And behind her was this Last Waltz, this big palooka that she's picked as her running mate. I mean, Joe Biden picked Kamala because nobody was going to shoot him with her next in line. Kamala's picked the Last Waltz because nobody's going to shoot her with him next in line. But the thing that struck me, he looked off his head with drink or drugs or excitement or whatever it was. He looked unhinged, as did she, and the two of them together, Mutt and Jeff, Laurel and Hardy. He's got a mouth like the Mersey Tunnel and doesn't appear to have any teeth and laughs just as disturbingly as she does. And when the two of them are laughing at the same time, dear God, save us from the United States. Now, podcast news, the MOATS podcast, which you can get now by scanning the QR code on the screen, is doing fantastically well. I can never really credit these extraordinary numbers. We are number 1 in Peru. In Peru. What's the name of that bear again? Paddington. Paddington Bear and the mother of all talk shows. We are number 1 in Peru. A quick call then before the end of this hour. We've got Scott Ritter coming up right after this. Lisa in Manchester on the riots. Lisa, what are you thinking?
Hi, George. Number 1 in Peru should be number 1 everywhere, in my eyes.
That's amazing.
We're scared. Yeah. We're all scared. What the hell, George? What's going on? It's come to something. And these people, I can understand the country with a Tory government, the last 14 years, and what they've done. But to try and take it out on other human beings, what the hell? What is going on?
Yeah, it's, of course, a state of false consciousness in the extreme. People, they say if they've got legitimate grievances, we've got 100, 200, 300 legitimate grievances. But the solution's not to burn down Abdul's corner store that you've been shopping in for the last 25 years. It's not Abdul's fault that you can't get your kid into a school, or you can't get a hospital appointment, can't even get a GP's appointment, you can't get a decent job, your kids can't make use of whatever qualifications they've got, no hope, no way forward. That's not Abdul's fault, Lisa.
Absolutely not. And, you know, I was watching things like Jeremy Vine and people are calling in. And I just can't believe some of the things I'm hearing. It's beyond comprehension, to be honest.
I didn't hear any of that last part of your conversation. I hope the audience did. But in any case, Lisa, I thank you for the call. Now, after this very short break, a very big man, Scott Ritter, former former US Marine intelligence officer, former arms inspector, one of the most significant military political figures in the world today. Scott Ritter, coming up right after this. Thank you. Go ahead.
During your show in the past, you've often mentioned that Donald Trump would be a much better alternative than Biden, although you weren't a big fan of him, etc. And you said that in all likeliness, if he gets in power, he'll be much more appeasing towards Putin. There'll be less likely of the conflict to escalate. But I have to tell you, I'm not so sure about that. Really, I think the only way to solve all this, it doesn't matter if Kenny gets in or anyone else, because there's always going to be, at one stage of our lifetime, two psychotic leaders of the superpowers. Why hasn't anyone in your show or yourself mentioned anything about nuclear disarmament or CND? Surely the only way to save humanity is by nuclear disarmament. And I just wanted to see what you thought about that.
Yeah, well, of course, but how are you going to get that? I mean, does CND even still exist? They could have been leafleting outside every cinema showing Oppenheimer. But of course, they don't have enough people to fill a telephone box. It is the worst example I know of, although the Stop the War Coalition runs it close, of an organization that for its sectarian, internal, political reasons has thrown away its brand. I have not appeared on a Stop the War platform for an entire decade. Not to worry, no to NATO, no to war. Its rival organization attracts exponentially larger numbers of people. They cannot help themselves, these people. These members of leftist groupuscles have it in their DNA that they cannot get along with anybody who isn't exactly like them. And as the number of people who are exactly like them is mercifully tiny, they end up in tiny organizations. So, of course, I'm in favor of the destruction of nuclear weapons. But how are you going to get that? It's a totally utopian slogan to advance at this point in time. I'm just trying to stop the weapons from being used.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Is Tommy Robinson a domestic terrorist, yes or no? 25,741 of you have voted. You've still got about another 40 minutes to get your vote in, and I suggest that you do so that we have the biggest sample of opinion possible. You can vote on Telegram, on my Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Now, Before Scott Ritter comes, we've got an old pal of mine, Seán Murray, the Irish film director of note, who was making some very powerful captures of the mob that were out in Belfast in the north of Ireland over the weekend, and they struck me so powerfully, and there's been a lot of problems since then also, with raids even into Republican areas in the Falls Road last night to try and attack Middle Eastern business there. The problem in Belfast, in the north of Ireland, is not over. So I was delighted that Seán Murray accepted my invitation to be on the mother of all talk shows this evening. Seán, thanks for that. My grandmother used to say, Our Lady weeps when she hears a woman swear. It's kind of silly. But I kind of feel the same way when I see Irish people evincing racial hatred against victims of colonialism, victims of empire. It just seems unnatural to me, for two reasons. First of all, Ireland is itself a victim of colonialism for 800 years, illegally occupied, and some of it still is. But secondly, because the Irish have sailed all over the world as immigrants, and I'm the product of that myself. And to hear them curse immigrants just sounds somehow unnatural. That's the point I'm making. Tell me, how shocked or surprised should I be at the sight of people with an Irish flag talking hate against foreigners?
Yeah, well, George, it's a complete anathema to recently to see the Irish flag when flown with these type of people. It's a very recent phenomenon. I know that these things have really kicked off since I would say since COVID. You have people who were cooked up, who didn't have the sense to critically think for themselves, and have just all of a sudden come out and have had right-wing leanings. And here we have it. These recent riots in Belfast, we have basically a coalition of bigots and sectarian thugs. We have these far right coming up from Dublin, and I have to say, not a terrible lot that came up from Dublin, but at the same time, they come up and they disgrace the national flag by standing beside sectarian bigots with Union Jacks and people giving Nazi salutes and all the rest of it. It was a shameful day for Belfast.
Yeah, I'm interested in that quantity point that you made. One can get the impression from social media that there are thousands upon thousands of people in the Free State who have come out post-COVID, come out of their shell, and are now a clear and present danger to social cohesion in Ireland, if not the physical and personal safety of immigrants and asylum seekers in Ireland. But how many of them are there really?
Well, yeah, I think there was enough to disrupt the recent election in the South. So, I mean, you had a campaign against Sinn Féin in the South. Now, Sinn Féin isn't in government. You had the two main parties in the South, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, who have been leading the charge since partition. Both have been the stalwarts of government since partition in the 1920s. It's been either one of those that have been in power. And that's still the case. You have that coalition between these two parties. Sinn Féin is not in government, but Sinn Féin is feeling the brunt of these far right attacks. But also recently we had a Sky News report which investigated where a lot of these tweets, these far right tweets, had come from in Ireland, and I think it's almost 60% came from the United States. Now, if we look at a recent Guardian report, for example, of who was funding, that they contend who's been funding TommyRobinson, it's a nexus of far-right groups in America that are aligned to Israel. So that's very, very interesting, because a lot of people, including myself, believe that far-right money, that American money and that Israeli money, is also finding its way to Ireland. And of course, what's the agenda here? First of all, to stunt the growth of Sinn Féin in Ireland for a start, but also to cause discord between the Muslim communities in Britain and in Ireland, which we're seeing now.
Yeah, I mean, so much of this comes from the United States and purports to be Irish, purports to be British. Somebody gave themselves away the other day. A guy who's been tweeting at me for many weeks suddenly gave himself away by spelling the word colour in the American way and the word civilized in the American way, thus immediately unmasking himself as a US-based troll. All of us know the proper way of spelling colour and civilized, and it's not the American way. But the social media is, of course, a nest of special interests and troll farms and propaganda psyop organizations. And we've now got a situation where Twitter's owner seems to have cast aside any pretensions of free speech and of providing a town square where we can all have our say. He's moved into fifth gear as a supporter of Netanyahu personally and of the overthrow of the government in Venezuela, for example. I'm not sure what either of those two things got to do with him, but it's certainly an abuse of corporate power. What should we do about that? Can't we have our own platforms?
Well, I would love to see an alternative platform. I mean, X probably is the most powerful with regards to getting the political message out there from any quarter. But since Elon Musk has taken the reins of X, it has become an absolute cesspit. I mean, some of the accounts, just racist accounts alone that are on X that I see daily, that have been reported so many times, it's hard to believe that those accounts still are still online. I mean, the worst kind of racism that I've seen, you know. But I don't know, how do we build an alternative power structure that challenges these kind of views and also something that's quite democratic, that all views can be heard? It'll be quite a struggle.
Indeed. So what happens next? Much of the violence against the ethnic minorities in the north of Ireland has been in the eastern part of Belfast. The more civilised West Belfast was having a festival, a Céile, a Féile, which broke all records, attracted record crowds, great cultural diversity, whilst they were burning out Pakistanis in East Belfast. But I saw last night an effort was made to cross over the sectarian line and get into the Falls Road and do damage there. Are people fully seized of the danger of that?
No, well, if you're speaking about the same incident, George, there was an incident on the Falls Road last night. I was there. I was at the store afterwards. So what had happened was they were a bunch of youths. We have this glider system in Belfast now where it's you're able to it's like a train but a bus service, a long bus service, and the kids are jumping off on stops a few miles away. They're running in and raiding shops quickly, stealing stuff and moving on. And there's 20 or 30 of them. And last night they went into a small, I think the owner's Lebanese, went into a store. They were chased out of the store, and there was an incident outside. One of his sons were hit, and one of the young shoplifters were hit also. But the PSNI had come out and said that this was a hate incident. It wasn't a hate incident because their ordinary businesses have been suffering this from this crowd for weeks. I think that this was all blew out of proportion. This wasn't the same type of stuff that we've been seeing with the far right on Saturday, and then incidents around Sandy Row in South Belfast. So I would like to point that out first of all. The community came together very, very quickly and met the store owner, and a number of politicians made statements. But I'm very, very surprised that the PSNI made a statement saying that it was a hate crime, to be quite truthful.
But the hate crimes definitely took place at the weekend in Sandy Row. The deliberate targeting of isolated immigrants who many of whom have been trading and serving these communities for decades, got their shops burnt out, their livelihood destroyed, and their lives threatened. How? Why?
Well, you have these. What had happened on Saturday was that you had a far-right demonstration had been organised for 12 o'clock. I think it was on Saturday. So there was a counter demonstration organised for 11:30. Now the counter demonstration consisted of anti-fascist groups, socialist groups, and what have you, before the main procession arrived of the far-right groups. So what you'd had is you'd had a standoff. The police were in the middle, just outside City Hall. I mean, the far right and the loyalist group that had congregated across the street from City Hall were outnumbered 5-1, but they were very poisonous. Some of the vulgar insults that they were shouting across at the demonstrators and at the police, which I've captured all in camera, by the way, including threats to myself and other journalists, was off the Richter, was off the scale. So what had happened then, they had organised or to then walk up to the Islamic Centre up beside Queen's University in South Belfast, which was a very, very dangerous precedent to set. I mean, for any of these groups to go up and mobilise outside an Islamic Centre wasn't good. The PSNI, the police service they knew that this was going to happen, so I don't understand how they would allow that group. I'd heard Norman mentioned earlier on about the police being under-resourced in England. It's diabolical here in the north of Ireland also. The police are well under-resourced, and we've seen that on Saturday. They made their way to the Islamic Centre. On their way up, they had smashed a number of businesses, including a Lebanese cafe. Made their way up to the Islamic Centre, where myself and a number of journalists had been awaiting their arrival. As I had left City Hall, what I was worried about, that there are small nationalist enclaves, small nationalist areas like the Lower Armour Road and the Market, which had suffered over many years through loyalist paramilitaries. And particularly the Lower Armour, we had, I'm sure you've heard, George, of the Sean Graham's Bookmakers Massacre. I had phoned the
5
local
people
residents.
who were murdered, yeah.
That's correct, yeah. So they were murdered with guns that were supplied through collusion. One of the pistols came from the British Army, and the other came from the South African shipment that the security service were involved in. So you had five innocent people killed there. We've had a history of orange parades marching through that area, which have only been stopped over this last number of years. So it's a very volatile area. I phoned Jared Rice and said, were there troops on the ground? Were there people on the ground there? Because we had a situation where you had 200 or 300 loyalists and far right walking up through South Belfast, and there was a high possibility that those people entering the Lower Armour area. And once we had got to the Islamic Centre, it became apparent that these people didn't even know where they were going. A lot of these people were just following a crowd. And I remember when I was younger in riots in Belfast, some of these kids from Sandy Row, they're joining a big crowd. They're getting caught in the middle of this. It's understandable. But there were leaders there. And as sure as I had said to Jared Rice, they began to walk down to the Lower Armour. This was going to be a disaster. By the time I got down to Sean Graham's, the crowds were already on the road. We began to push them back down to University Street. There was some hand-to-hand fighting, and the police came on the scene. But that was a complete disaster waiting to happen. The policing wasn't. It should have been. And after speaking to a Sinn Féin representative later on, Dirty Hargey, who had also phoned on the way up from City Hall, she had said that the police were warned about this the day before. So it's something that is very worrying. Okay, we have the problem of the far right, but there are agitators within the loyalist community who would still have that eagerness to kill not only a Catholic but anybody within the migrant community.
Wow. Sean, I'm glad that you came on. I'm glad that you cleared up that point about the Falls Road last night, because I was worried that might become the shape of things to come. And placing it in the context of what you and your community have been through these last 40 years or so. Seán Murray, film director, documentary maker, thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Is Tommy Robinson a domestic terrorist? It's a simple question. And 26,239 of you have voted. Now, I have some really very significant news. We're just hearing that Scott Ritter's home is being raided by state police and the FBI, and we are unable to get hold of him. His phone goes straight to voicemail. He was due to appear on the mother of all talk shows tonight at 8 o'clock. It's unclear if he has been detained. We'll try to get him on the show on Sunday to tell us what happened. We have no further information on this at this time. So there you are. The FBI are in Scott Ritter's home, and he is not, therefore, available to join us, at least so far this evening. We're thinking of you, Scott. The very best to you. Let's take a quick break, and then it's your calls all the way up to Gayatri. Stay tuned. On the line is a Rose in Texas. Was that the beginning of a song? On Californication, which is a song. Rose, welcome to the show.
Fan of the show, transgender fan of the show, and I wanted to briefly address your monologue from last week on Californication, because I almost entirely agree with what you said. Trans women athletes taking medals and records, directing children at nightclubs, and even going to elementary schools themselves, not to mention hormone blockers for children as well. The attack on freedom of speech, not only against conservatives, but anyone who doesn't fall in line with the agenda, rainbow flags on NATO military aircraft, which is certainly doing more to cultivate anti-queer sentiment around the world than there already is. All of that makes me sick. So because I don't believe in incest, bestiality, necrophilia, and pedophilia, I'm basically culturally right-wing by today's standards, even though less than 5 years ago, I'd still be left-wing. So in regards to you and everyone else watching who thinks of me and people like me as the villains right now, you should know that I support the most traditional Muslim, Jewish, Abrahamic believers to be as homophobic and transphobic as they want, because guess what? That's freedom of religion, which is a value we claim to have in the West. Now, my religion, I suppose, is I believe I'm a woman, but guess what? Not everyone has to convert to my religion. Otherwise, we basically have a theocracy, only this theocracy is for the ever-evolving LGBTQIA supercalifragilisticexpialidocious club. So that's all I wanted to get out of my system. Thank you.
Well, Rose, if I could put your call in a glass bottle and ship it around the world, I promise you that I would do so. Crystal clear, beautifully expressed, and I wish you every happiness in life. It is exactly what people who are transgender should be saying. And if they were, they would disappoint the liberal zealots who want to use them as a battering ram against the traditional family values of the rest of us. Beautifully expressed, Rose. I'll never forget it.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Let's go to Rhode Island. Why wouldn't we? Well, the lovely Zoya wants to talk about the riots. Go ahead, Zoya.
Hi, George. Nice to talk to you. I was just thinking, about the UK riots since they started, that if this is making, if they're targeting mosques, despite the fact that we all know that it wasn't a Muslim who committed the Southport attack, that this is awfully convenient because it makes Muslims afraid to leave their homes or open their stores, when we've just seen a whole bunch of people doing pro-Palestinian protests. And now, of course, they can't do that because they're afraid to leave their homes. So, A, the convenience sort of stinks there. B, is TommyRobinson a domestic terrorist? He's in Cyprus, where there are rumors that the British airbase has been supplying Israel, that the Israelis have used an airbase in Cyprus. So my leanings wouldn't be domestic terrorists, maybe a foreign agent, however. And also, did you notice Keir Starmer trying to make himself a hero to the Muslim community because he's going to protect them from these awful far-right activists? That seems sort of convenient, given that
I don't think anyone. I don't think anyone is persuaded by that. And as usual with Starmer and with others, of his political stripe. He sought to triangulate, and he's ended up alienating both sides. Most people are completely unconvinced by the semi-good things that he said, and the people who are angry at what people like me regard as semi-bad things that he said are even angrier at him than they were before. There has never been a Prime Minister, and I joked about this before these riots. Will Keir Starmer last as long as Liz Truss? Will he outlive that famous lettuce? There has never been a Prime Minister who started with less goodwill in the country and who has so dramatically lost any goodwill that he had in not even a whole calendar month. If someone organised a march of no confidence in Keir Starmer with no other baggage, no other policies, no other platforms, just one demand, no confidence in Keir Starmer, I for one would be there, whoever else was on it. Zoya, thanks for that wonderful call. Caroline is in Colorado, another beautiful place. Go ahead, Caroline.
Hi, George. How you doing? I want to tell you first,
Good,
I love
good.
your it's great. And I understand what's going on in the UK because I think this all has been planned for a long time for every country, because right now they're trying to make the Palestinians look bad because there's a war over there, and the Zionists run everything, even here in the United States. They're a part of our country. I don't know what I can say or what I can't say or what I can't, because everywhere in the world is being censored right now. And I'm not used to that as an American. I'm used to, we can say whatever we want, we can write whatever we want, but that hasn't been the way it is. I see that people overseas are getting arrested on Facebook and in the UK and all over. It's just, it blows my mind.
Well, we will remain a bastion of free speech, and we will support everyone else's right to free speech. And if we go down, we'll go down fighting, and I will go down standing on the bridge until the last moment, until the waves overcome us. So be assured about that. We speak our mind here, and we appreciate others who do the same. And thanks for doing that. I have such fond memories of Colorado. I've spoken there a couple of times. Ange says, George, please invite Ali Abu Nima from Electronic Intifada. Germany's government are gunning for him, sending him threatening legal letters re his arrest, trying to silence him. We have invited him before, but he hasn't accepted yet. Danielle says there are more Irish immigrants in the world than there are Irish in Ireland. Indeed, I'm one of them. Bob Cosmic says, I have Scottish and Jamaican ancestry. Am I a Scotland yardie? That is very funny, Bob. That's the joke of the night. I have Scottish and Jamaican ancestry. Am I a Scotland yardie? You know my other show? It just got really interesting. Yesterday's Have It Out with Galloway was hilarious and sulphurous and explosive. All the things that you'd want such a program to be. Have It Out with Galloway. You can appear on it. haveitoutwithgalloway.com, www at the beginning, and just say that you want to be on the show. And it's not like here where you're just phoning up. You're on the screen behind me. Everyone can see as well as hear you. Take a look at this clip. If you want to join me on Have It Out with Galloway, you can be the audience member on that video wall so that I can see as well as hear you. Come and have it out with Galloway. Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough. www.haveitoutwithgalloway.com.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
I do hope you'll watch the show, you'll spread it, and that you will appear on it. So, let's go to Germany for the next call, where Malik wants to talk about the riots in Britain. How embarrassing it is. Everyone in the whole world wants to talk about the riots in Britain. That's what we're used to doing about the riots in America and France and elsewhere. Malik, go ahead.
Hello, Mr. Galloway. Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, there's some delay in the transmission. And anyway, what I want to say is that I have had my share encounter with the British racial riots, and this in the 70s, and these are not something new. But what is new about these riots is they are very organized, and they seem to be centrally controlled. And I think there also seems to be some involvement from the government. Could you please enlarge on that, if the case?
Well, there's no evidence. There's no evidence that there's anything to do from the government. I'd love to see it if there was. I'd be the first person to punish it if there was. But I haven't seen any evidence at all that the government is in any way involved, but there's definitely a guiding hand. I know from my own experience that organizing one demonstration is a headache enough, it's difficult enough, complicated enough. If they really have pulled off 100 demonstrations, the length and breadth of this country this evening, then it isn't the mutton heads that are going through the window and grabbing the steak bakes out of Greg's that is behind it. It's not the looters of Crocs and the rest. This is evidence of a guiding hand. I don't believe that it's the government, much as I despise the government. I have not seen any evidence of that. But well organized, Malik, you are absolutely right. When we review what's happened this evening, and I'm not in a position to do that because I'm on air talking to you, but when we have reviewed it, say by Sunday, we'll have more to say on that. Malik, safely in Germany, although it's not really safe in Germany if you are a Muslim either. Iqbal is in London on the riots. Go ahead, Iqbal.
Hi, George. How are you?
Hi. Good, thank you.
Well, George, firstly, I'd like to thank you very much for the wonderful work you are doing. It's greatly appreciated, and we really, really appreciate the work you are doing, really. But regards the riots, what I would like to say is that it obviously, it looks like it's all instigated or set up, and it's there to provoke both sides. The whites in the UK, well, all over the world, and Muslims. It's also there to provoke the Muslims, and both sides should be quite careful not to fall into the trap. If we are to be successful, we have to be quite wary what's going on and not fall into the trap and take the law into our own hands.
That's right. Defense is one thing, and as I said the other night, if you are living in a street that is being targeted by these far-right racist thugs who are intent on having a race riot in your street, then you better be hoping that your father and your brothers are going to go outside and protect you, or the Molotov cocktail could be coming through your window, and the house that burns down could be your house. Counter demonstrations, on the other hand, especially where they don't turn up, but the counter demonstration goes ahead anyway, that's deeply negative. That is exactly what those that hate Muslims want to see. They want a picture of angry Muslims chasing what turned out in Birmingham to be non-existent racist rioters, and then it was made to look like it was the Muslims that were the problem rather than the victims of the problem. So I caution everybody to beware of deliberate provocation, to respond to real threats in a disciplined way, in a strong but disciplined way, and to cooperate fully with the police force in bringing these situations under control. When they are under control, Iqbal, that won't be the end of the matter. First of all, there'll be a lot of trials. There'll be a lot of people being sentenced to prison and the rest. And the legitimate grievances that the whole of the British working class have got will have to be pressed home. We'll have to press home the point that the reason that people are so incredibly angry in the country is not about 0.18% of our population being asylum seekers. That's a problem, but it's not a problem comparable to the problem in Germany, in Italy, in Greece, in Spain. They have vastly greater numbers of refugees than us. And many of them didn't cause the refugees in the first place, but the British state did cause the refugees in the first place. So not only do we have to take our fair share of the refugee flow, we ought to be taking more than our fair share, because we did more than anybody else, other than the United States, to create this flow of refugees across the world. So it's a problem. Mass immigration, to which I am opposed, is a problem. But neither of these two things, even if you add these two things together, neither of these two things are not the main problem that Britain faces. It's not the fault of the immigrant that Britain's economy tanked in the crash in 2008. Wasn't Abdul, the street corner guy that has the little shop, wasn't him that tanked the economy in 2008. It was white guys in shirts and ties in the gleaming towers of the City of London. It was them and their equally white political masters, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, and the rest. It wasn't Abdul that caused a decade of austerity in which everything in Britain got much poorer. The people got much poorer. The public realm got much poorer. Everything got much shabbier. Everything got more ragged, more broken, to the point that we are now, as I said at the beginning, look, I'm in the Netherlands now. The Netherlands is twice as clean, twice as busy, twice as productive, twice as cohesive, twice as peaceful than our country. Now I know that people who don't like me are currently shouting at the screen, why don't you go there? Because I'm British. Because I love Britain. Because I want to save Britain. That's why I don't live in Russia or any of these other places you tell me I should go and live. I live in Britain, and I'm going to continue to live in Britain. And I'm never going to turn my back on the British people and their legitimate grievances. Now, let me go to Salim in London. Go ahead, Salim.
Hello. Thank you very much, Mr. Galloway. It's always been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you so much to you and to Gayatri and to all of your team who has been doing splendid work for this. And today I would like to take 2 minutes, please, because I have so many things to say, but 3 things for now. Recently, you reshared your post about your greatest ever interview. Yes, that was the greatest ever interview, I feel like, on the Sky News, when the journalist asks you about Iran giving the missiles to Hezbollah, which can target any part of Israel. And you said, well, U.S. is giving the missiles to Israel, which can hit any part of the Muslim world. And I don't know, why are they blind and they can't see the other side of the story? Second thing is, that's amazing that the Middle Eastern world is waking up. You have seen in Bangladesh, and recently the students in Pakistan have given the ultimatum to the powers that they have to release Imran Khan. Otherwise, the Pakistani students are also on the verge of revolution, and that's amazing because we want people like Imran Khan who represent us and to have a change so that we don't need to go through all of this stuff. Number three, coming back to the what happened at Southport. Number one, if someone has posted that the murderer is a Muslim, why didn't they verify it? And they went to the mosque and broken the windows and everything. And okay,
yeah,
that's fine. But
it was a terror. That was a terror assault on the mosque in Southport, and was indeed deeply terrifying and completely the result of false information that was either willfully or inadvertently fed into the public realm. The utterly fake allegation that the murderer of these three small children was A, a Muslim, B, an illegal migrant, C, had arrived in a boat, D, was a Syrian Muslim extremist. This was all false from A to Z. The person on trial for murdering these three little children is a former child actor on BBC Doctor Who, and who was born in Cardiff in Wales, and whose parents came from Rwanda, where not 2% of the population is Muslim, and he is not a Muslim. So the fake story that was put into the public arena, without doubt deliberately in the first instance, others may have inadvertently fallen for what turned out to be a very vicious and dangerous hoax. That's what was the proximate reason for the attack on the mosque in Southport, and provided the spark which is still burning this very evening, it seems, all over the country. But while I have the opportunity, what the young people of Bangladesh have just done in overthrowing the corrupt, looting tyrants of Bangladesh, the youth and the masses of Pakistan must now do. Imran Khan is the legitimate Prime Minister of Pakistan. The masses must release him from prison. You have to make the earth shake in Pakistan with millions of boots on the ground. Millions of footsteps have to shake the tyrants from their lairs. Because if the people of Bangladesh can free themselves from tyranny and dictatorship, the people of Pakistan don't want to be in second place, do they? I know the people of Pakistan. I know the masses of Pakistan. I know they don't want to be in second place to Bangladesh. So come on, people of Pakistan. Either the tyrants must leave or the people must overthrow them. Long live Imran Khan. Free, free Imran Khan. That's my message this evening. Well, I've got my good wife on the line. What's rattling, Gayatri?
The social media is still rattling about the riot taking place in the UK. But before I go to that, did Salim just mention the infamous interview that you gave on Sky News 18 years ago. Because that is...
This is the anniversary.
It is the anniversary, and it's great that he mentioned that.
It's got millions, I think 100 million or more views. It keeps coming out every year, sometimes twice a year, and it gets another million, another 2 million, another 3. There was something about the atmosphere that morning. It was the Lebanese resistance giving the Israelis a bloody good hiding, and it was a critical mass. The stupidity of the Sky News presenter, especially as she was dealing with me like a bear with a sore head early on a Sunday morning, 7 o'clock. Not a good time to start trying to rile me rather than properly interview me. Well, I've now made her famous throughout the whole world. Sorry, Gayatri, go ahead.
Let's go to the social media tonight and our poll, which asks, is Tommy Robinson a domestic terrorist? You said earlier it's a straightforward question. The answers, on the other hand, are not as straightforward, and the responses have been quite variant. It's roughly 65% yes, 35% no across all the platforms. Christopher says he's tweeting from Napa, so it's more like an international one than domestic. There's been lots of defenders, should we put it that way, or not so much defenders, or those arguing no in response to this poll. Carl Floyd says, of course he is not. That is absurd. We do not label people with opposing views as terrorists. We debate them, and if he's wrong, we debate him more and embarrass him. Carl Morris says, well, does he incite violence? Does he look to bring regime change? Then, if he is, he's on the same level as any previously convicted under attack, like Imam Abu Hamza. And there's more arguments like this. This one in particular from Countess of Monte Cristo. He says, I would say members of the government are more fit the role of domestic terrorists than Tommy Robinson is. They have locked up people in their houses, injected them with bioweapons, flooded the country with an unsustainable amount of migrants, causing chaos. Soon they will be pushing digital ID. So it's quite a debate going on in response to that poll, George.
Yeah, and you can see, I mean, although the great majority think he is a domestic terrorist, there's a considerable number of people who don't, particularly on the YouTube community poll, for example, where 13,000 people voted on just that platform. 40% of those say no to that question. Now, Tommy may have mobilized his supporters. I keep calling him Tommy. Of course, that's not even his name. I don't know why we do him the credit of calling him Tommy. His name's Stephen. I think that's his birth name. But as the judge in America found, he has a bewildering number of aliases, but only one paymaster, Gayatri, and that paymaster is the Israel lobby. Never lose track of that.
Well, this is exactly what Tim says. He says, well, Tommy Robinson, he takes Israeli cash from his backer, and without a doubt, he's the reliable source of hate. But we do as a country need to have a proper grown-up discussion about all immigration, legal and illegal. No need for racism, no need for hate, but a need for a plan with the support of all, and that's all this.
That's fine. I'm up for that. I've always been up for that. As you know, I'm against mass immigration. Mass immigration is bad for the country that the immigrants come from, and it's bad for the people already here of all colours and creeds, because our country cannot sustain in the shrunken public realm that we have huge influxes of new people. But we have to keep this in perspective. Not only is the number of refugees vastly smaller than people think it is, 0.18% of our population are asylum seekers. But the immigrants that we are told about, most of them are not immigrants. You're not an immigrant if you were born here, but you've got a brown face. That's not an immigrant. That's just a British person with a brown face. Our children have got brown faces, but they're born in Britain, they've got British passports, they're not immigrants. Don't call them immigrants. But there's a very significant number of people in this debate who just don't like people of colour. They don't like that Jude Bellingham had to save their bacon in the Euros. They don't like the Nigerian pastor in black Christian churches any more than they like the Pakistani origin imam from the local mosque. They just don't like black people. And even if their great-grandchildren are still being born here, they'll still want to call them immigrants. But they are not immigrants, and therefore are outside of this discussion, unless, of course, you're a racist. Last one from you, Gayatri.
Well, I guess that's what it comes down to, isn't it? The binary and the divide and conquer between the races and those who want to defend the multiculturality of Britain. So Jason asked, so why do you continue to fan his claims, George? We all know what he is, so you're making him more relevant than he is. And I wonder, are we making him more relevant than he is? Should we downplay it, or should we? What do we do? Obviously, surely we should look at the roots of the riots that are taking place.
Yeah, maybe your correspondent is right, but from what I can gather, there's very serious trouble in England again this evening, and that presages very serious trouble again in England on Saturday, and he, Robinson, is a key player in that very considerable serious trouble, and therefore it's difficult to ignore him. Anyway, I'll take you for chips after the show. Even if we are in The Hague, they still do chips outside.
They do the best.
Mayonnaise. They put mayonnaise on their chips. Thank you very much, Gayatri. Let me go to Belfast and talk with Fra. Fra, welcome. What have you got on your mind?
Thank you very much, George. Tomato sauce goes well with your mayonnaise and your chips, just to add that to the conversation.
Is that just a tip? Okay.
Yeah, it is nice, genuinely. George, I wanted to maybe just give people an update as to what's happening in the north of Ireland. On Saturday, we had a illegal kind of march/procession from fascist, racist elements who gathered at Belfast City Hall, and they wanted to go to the Belfast Islamic Centre. Now, there was a peaceful Antifa counter demonstration that was attended by the trade unions and civic bodies, to include many of the organisations that work with asylum seekers, refugees, and people who have come here in distress, hoping for a safer place to live. So there was trouble up towards the mosque. They attacked a few hotels that have contracts with the Home Office for housing asylum seekers and refugees. And then last night on the Woodville, on the Shankill Road, there's videos of young masked men kicking in doors, smashing windows, destroying cars. There was a delivery guy on a bicycle who was trailed off his bike and badly beaten. There was a man on Saturday who was attacked, a man from Sudan, I believe, and had to be hospitalised in Sandy Row at Donegal Pass area in Belfast City Centre. It was actually people from the district who came out and saved that man before the police intervened. They seemed to be happy sitting in their jeeps, gathering evidence instead of going out and protecting people on the streets. Tonight at Chimney Corner Hotel in the suburbs of Belfast and Glengormley, there is a large crowd intent on intimidating the people in the Chimney Corner Hotel. And on Friday, there is another march supposedly going to the Belfast Islamic Centre between 5 and 7 p.m. There are also demonstrations proposed for Lisburn, Lorne, Ballymena, Coleraine and Limavady. Now, these are all kind of hotbeds of loyalist paramilitary extremism. And if you speak to anyone, I wouldn't want to be walking around some of these areas tonight, George, as a person of colour. I would be genuinely frightened for my life. It's very, very, very bad what's happening here, and I'm sad to say I think it's destined in the short term to get worse. But I have a question. I have two, really. One question is, are there parallels with the 1930s? Now, I know we're not talking about Hitler and Mussolini, and there was Oswald Mosley and the Battle of Cable Street on the 4th of October 1936. Are we heading into that type of territory? Because the division in society is very, very, very deep. It's very, very, very fractured, and it's fraught with political violence. And a sub-question to that is, those racists in the early 1930s used the Jewish community as their enemy in order to build their fascist ideology, because it is a political ideology, and trying to gain power. Now, are the Zionist lobby and others trying to turn the anti-Semitism of the right into Islamophobia? So Muslims are the enemy, no longer, thankfully, the Jewish people. Is that where we're heading, and how do you see it ending? Thank you.
Well, these are the very big questions that there's not enough time to do justice to, Fra. I don't think we're back to the 1930s, but we could be back to the breakup of Yugoslavia. We could be at that level with communities who happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time and who are not there in sufficient critical mass that they can be effectively pogromed. They can be driven and driven out and driven away. I think that's a real problem. I don't want to tempt fate, but I can think of lots of places in England where the racists, the race rioters, would not dare walk. Because they'd get a bloody good hiding, where the Muslim community is in sufficient numbers, sufficient young men, most of whom seem to go to kickboxing of one kind or another, Thai boxing, jiu-jitsu, karate, all the martial arts. I don't know a young Muslim in the parts of England that I have represented and continue to have a great deal of connection with. I don't know one of them who is not more than capable of standing up for themselves in any physical confrontation. So I caution those that would attack them of that. There are some places where the Muslim community is more isolated, where it's in insufficient numbers. I mean, nobody looking to witch hunt black people is going to go to Tottenham in North London because the black people there will leave you on the floor bleeding if you do. So I'm not as worried about those communities, but the communities that are slightly more isolated in fewer, smaller numbers could conceivably, God forbid, end up in the position of minorities throughout the former Yugoslavia. We're just talking about the Croatian attempted annihilation of its Serbian minority. The anniversary was this week. And of course, we all know what happened in Bosnia and so on. So the danger of that level of civil strife is very, very real. But it isn't going to lead to a Holocaust like we saw in the 1930s in occupied Europe. Thanks, Fra. Look, a quick call. I've got time. Only for a quick one. Kevin in Cheshire. On you go, Kevin. You're the last caller.
George.
What would you like to say?
Well, Hey, very well.
Oh,
thank
good.
You. Thanks for having. I'll be quick. But, you know, to be fair, mate, you've mentioned most of it about Yaxley Lennon. My gripe is with, you know, I'm English. I say English. My mum was Italian, and after the Second World War, my granddad being a tank driver, like a lot of the British Army did, they found themselves girlfriends, brought them back home, and voila, I'm one of them. And because I've got white skin, I'm not, you know, I'm not picked on in any way, shape, or form. That stopped, to be fair, probably around the 90s. I don't know what it's like down in London, but I know in the northwest, Liverpool, places like that, there is no racism about. If there is, they keep themselves locked up indoors, like paedophiles and stuff like that. So, going on about Lennon, Yaxley Lennon, I think the problem lies with Israel, like everything else around the world at the minute, and people aren't aware of what's going on. Scott Ritter, you know, he'll tell you himself. He's somebody that I've been following for a long time. He's very clued up. He's well aware of what's going on around the world, and he knows exactly where Yaxley Lennon comes from and what his job is specifically to do.
What his job is. I think that caveat that you made there is a very, very good one, very perspicacious. What his job is. Wouldn't we all like to see his job description? But we don't need to look in the crystal ball. We can read the book of what he is doing and has been doing. Sorry to cut you off, Kev, but I'm already over the witching hour. Is Tommy Robinson a domestic terrorist? 27,753 of you voted, and overwhelmingly, though not unanimously by any means, you say yes, Tommy Robinson is a domestic terrorist. Now, Scott Ritter was unable to join us. We understand that the FBI are literally in his house at this moment. He has long been a fearsome critic of the state and of the Biden administration's conduct of state affairs in relation to the Ukraine, in relation to Israel-Palestine, in relation to the Iran affair. And it may be that this raid by the FBI is connected to that. We'll do everything we can to find out, and I promise we'll have him on Sunday if he is at liberty to do so. Sorry about the earlier technical difficulties. We are coming impromptu from The Hague, and that was of necessity. But I'm glad that we were able to bring you what I think has been, nonetheless, a spirited and very well-viewed show. Last Sunday's show has broken all records. It may end in our first 4 million viewer show. 4 million views in a week for the mother of all talk shows. A man and wife and a dog. That's all we are. Going off for chips after the show with a budget that would make you laugh out loud. 4 million views. Seriously? Eat your heart out. So-called mainstream media. Nobody loves you anymore. Nobody believes you anymore. And nobody wants you anymore. So it's been marvelous for me. I hope it was for you. I have Control has just told me in my ear that I literally have just 10 seconds to say goodnight before I get kicked off the air. Thanks very much for watching. God willing, see you on Sunday for the mother of all talk shows. Good night.